right, welcome back in, guys. Talking Tide here. Welcome to the Week 3 reaction show. Yes, I know. I apologize. I didn't have time to do a preview show for this week, so we're just going to talk about what happened this weekend. If you've never been into the show, we're going to talk a little bit about SEC play. We might add in one or two games on top of that, and then, of course, we're going to talk about Bama football, which went really well this week. So stay tuned for that. There are a few things that I want to add into this series as well. So it's just a lot of stuff went on this week, and some of it good, some of it bad. So we'll get straight into it. We're gonna go through the list, what I got on ESPN, talk about a couple of games that kind of piqued my interest and might have some effects on Bama football down the road. So we'll get straight into it. There's a couple of games I really want to touch on, and a couple that we can just breeze through. First things first, Ole Miss, Wake Forest. Ole Miss beats Wake 40-6. Not much of a game there. Jackson Dart continues his Heisman campaign, threw for 337 or 377 this weekend. So he's on good form. Ole Miss will get into some real competition in the upcoming weeks, but they are a freight train right now, sitting at the number 5 in the AP poll, so they are in good shape. Boston College, Missouri. Now, Missouri ends up beating Boston College, the same Boston College that toppled the mighty Florida State, which we'll actually talk about, even though they're not in the SEC. A little bit about this game. This one's actually a little more interesting. 21-27, Missouri end up winning it. It was a close game throughout the game. Went to halftime, 14-17. Missouri looked good, but going into this game, Missouri had the top defense in the country, I believe, statistically. Maybe not the prettiest defense, but statistically, I want to say they had the top defense in the country. They did not look like that this past weekend. I actually took them minus the points to win the game, and they won, but they did not win by what they were favored by. I think Missouri were like a 15-point favorite, somewhere in that range. So they definitely struggled a little bit. Boston College looked like a good football team. Like I said, we all watched them beat Florida State. So it's a good football team, and it's a good test for Missouri, but they will need to shape up both sides of the ball a little bit. Tulane, Oklahoma. Oklahoma, of course, now in the SEC, beat Tulane 34-19. Jackson Arnold threw for 169 yards. Decent game. He was actually also the rushing leader as well at 97 yards. Decent game for Oklahoma. They have a big test coming up this weekend. They play Tennessee. That's at home in Norman. Tennessee are a 7-point favorite in that game. That's something we'll talk about on Friday night, but they'll get a real test that this upcoming weekend. But able to beat the Green Wave. Tulane, not a bad football team, and Oklahoma got it done, although maybe not as convincingly as they should. But again, this weekend will be a real test for them. A fun one, LSU, South Carolina. Let's go ahead and pull this game up. I'll be honest, it looked like South Carolina were going to walk away with it. They led 24-16 in the at halftime. Ole Miss was able to rally back in William Bryce Stadium to beat the Gamecocks. I took LSU to win this game and cover, which they obviously did not. A couple of things I want to talk about in this game. Lenore Sellers played a good football game. He got injured, I want to say, late in the game. Maybe in the third quarter. And that was kind of when the game flipped a little bit. South Carolina weren't able to sustain much offense, and LSU ended up being able to pull off a bit of a comeback. I want to say South Carolina were leading this game 17-0 at one point. LSU made it close at half. They put up a touchdown and a field goal late. Actually, they put up 2 touchdowns late in the second quarter to bring it back a little bit more within reason. The problem for South Carolina is, yeah, you lost your quarterback, but you have to be able to close out football games. That's one thing that was always preached by Saban. You got to finish. And they ended up missing a field goal late in the game. That would have sent it to overtime. They were not able to make it and ended up losing the game. LSU goes 2-1. There's a weird thing in college football, and as Bama fans, we do it all the time. If your team wins from a losing position, you still complain. And there's reason to complain if you're LSU. You're a much better football team, I believe. You have the superior quarterback. You have the superior run game. You've got the talent, but you can't go down 17-0 in the beginning of a game. And Williams-Brice Stadium is an awesome experience. It's as good as you can get in SEC play as far as atmosphere and electricity in the game. But if you're LSU, You want to kill that crowd as quickly as possible, and they did not do it. They let them in there the whole time, and it went down to a last-minute field goal that South Carolina ended up missing, and that's what the ball game was. It was a 3-point game. If you're LSU, you cannot start as cold as you did in this game. South Carolina, if you keep up going, you stay hot and finish, it's a totally different story. We talk about LSU getting blown out in this game. South Carolina have got to learn how to finish, and LSU have to learn how to not get blown out early. Because if you're against a team that's got a solid defense and a offense that can sustain drives and take the ball away from you, you're not coming back in this football game. I think LSU is a really good team. I think Garrett Nussmeier is the way forward for them. I always respect a guy who sits back, bides his time, especially nowadays, doesn't enter the transfer portal, hangs out, eventually gets a starting job and wins a couple games. I think they can go on and do more than that. The SEC is stacked this year, so it's going to be hard to go forward for LSU. I mean, there's a lot of football teams that I would put above them in the SEC, but they're still a good football team. They can win a lot of games this year, and I think Garrett Nussmeier is a good quarterback. I think he was the best quarterback on the field on Saturday. But as a team, you cannot let yourself go down so early and in such a tough place to play. But congrats to them. They got the win. I know people are going to complain they're not playing up to the standard, yada, yada. You won a football game. You were trailing by 17. Take the win and move on. They've got stiffer competition upcoming, obviously, but a win's a win. They were able to win a dogfight in South Carolina. All right, on to the next one. Texas A&M, Florida. I'm going to go ahead and say this. The scoreline does not do justice to how big of a blowout this football game was. Florida are in a bad place. And the thing is, I hate saying this. I like Billy Napier a lot, but he is not the guy to go forward for Florida. And once you start rotating quarterbacks every single drive, that tells me right there you're not sure what to do with the program. You don't know the way forward for them. You don't have an idea of what's going to be the best thing that you can't get the most out of a football game in one certain way. If you ever played college sports or ever played sports in general, it's high school, college, whatever it is, you know that there is a flow to a game. You cannot get in time with your team. You can't get the flow of the game. You can't see all that you need to see as a quarterback if you're rotated every single drive. Teams do enough to confuse quarterbacks with pressures and looks and shifts and movement and different coverage packages and all this kind of stuff. They do that to confuse a quarterback anyway, which works a substantial amount of the time, especially with a team like Texas A&M who has a lot of talent. But whenever you're rotating a guy every single drive, that's just not the way to help your quarterback succeed. I think DJ Lagway is the way forward for Florida. He did not play a good football game this past weekend, but neither did Graham Mertz. Mertz numbers obviously were much better. 12 for 15, 195 yards, touchdown and an interception. Lagway, 6 for 13, 54 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. So neither quarterback had a good day. Lagway's numbers actually are pretty abysmal looking at it again. He's young still, though. He's a freshman, so I think he is the way forward for this football team if they can hold on to him, that being in the offseason and the transfer portal and whatnot. But it's bad for Florida. I don't think Napier will be there by the end of the season. I don't know if they're going to try and promote somebody from within or what they're going to do, but they have to find some answers. It's kind of the same way Florida State is right now. It's a bit of a throwaway season. You're not going to win a lot of football games. You have a tough schedule, and you don't have the talent or the identity to go forward as a football team. You got to start figuring out what works, even if it's small things. Even if you lose games but find small successes in games, which for Florida is going to be very tough because they play tough competition this year, you have to qualify it as a win. If you can find some looks for quarterbacks, some coverage packages that work, anything that can help you out and get small wins that will eventually lead to big wins, which is just kind of obvious team sport kind of stuff, but they have some real work to do. For Texas A&M, big win, a dominant win. Like I said, more dominant than what the scoreline actually says. They actually ended up winning 33-20, but Marcel Reed is a real problem. Redshirt freshman started this game for Wigman, who has an MC sprain, I think. So he'll be back. He'll be back healthy. I don't know if he'll be back starting after the type of performance that Reed put up. His stats: 11 for 17, 178 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And he was just as impressive on the ground. He's a real problem for a dual threat quarterback. 13 carries, 83 yards, and 1 touchdown on the ground as well. So 3 total touchdowns, no interceptions, no fumbles for Marcel Reed. He is going to be a real problem going forward, not only for other competition, but I think for Connor Wigman as well. I think he's done a real job to put him in a spot where he can take over that starting job. I don't know. I say it all the time with Wigman. He's an okay quarterback. He can get the job done against lesser competition. But going into this game as a redshirt freshman in the swamp, playing Florida, and for me, Florida may have a different look to it because I grew up when Florida was a good football team. Under Urban Meyer, I remember the years when Bama would go up against them every year in the SEC championship game, and it was always a tough thing. And they've kind of lost that identity now overall. But he still went up against a program that has elite history and has a good name to it away from home, and ended up putting in a very dominant performance against what is a weak Florida team. But again, as a redshirt freshman, if you can go out there, you lead your team, it's 20-0 at halftime, and there's just no chance that Florida's going to get back into this football game. So fair play to Reed. I think he'll be a real problem. I don't know if Wigman's going to start when he gets back healthy. A&M have it'll probably be a few weeks before Wigman gets healthy. So we'll see. We'll look at the upcoming schedule that they have and have a better idea. But I think Texas A&M are growing in the season. I think they're a better football team than they were when they started. They lost to Notre Dame, obviously, at the beginning of the year, and it kind of felt like it was going to be a bit of a dour year for them, a little bit of a find yourself kind of year. But I think they've started to find themselves. They found some talent. They found some guys in there that can make a real difference and try and help lead this football team to where the talent level should be. Like I said, they've got one of the most talented rosters in college football, and I think with Marcel Reed at the helm over Wigman, I think they will have more success there. Let's see what we got next. So we had UAB Arkansas. Interesting football game. I was pulling for UAB. I'll be completely transparent. Arkansas ended up winning 27-37, but it was not without its troubles for Arkansas. They've had a bit of a weird schedule, a bit of a weird year so far. They've looked good for some games. They have not looked good for others. I think Arkansas is a good football program. You cannot have performances like they did when they played USB this past weekend. Again, they got the win. They were able to dig themselves out of it, but it was not a good overall performance from them as a whole. Quarterback play was very mediocre. Green threw for 11 for 26, 161 yards, and 1 interception, no touchdowns. They had a real problem moving the ball through the air, playing against a team like UAB. And they did not do a good job of defending the pass either. Jacob Zeno, the quarterback for UAB, went 23 of 32, 235 yards, and 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. If you're Arkansas, an SEC football team, at home, and your quarterback gets outplayed by the guy from UAB, that's a problem. You have to look at what's going on there and try and make adjustments. They only had 3 guys catch a football Saturday. One of them caught the ball one time for 8 yards. They had 2 receivers with more than 2 catches. Andrew Armstrong had 8 receptions, 137 yards, and no touchdowns, obviously, for a long of 29, which, again, not great. And the other 2 guys had 3 catches combined. They had 11 catches this past weekend. That is not the kind of quarterback play that is going to advance you very far in SEC play. And again, they got the ball thrown all over them. They had 9 different guys caught the ball for UAB, 23 catches, 235 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So they're going to have to figure it out there. Both teams lost a fumble. There's some work to be had for Arkansas. And again, they play an SEC schedule. It's only going to get harder from here. And they've really got to shape up before we really dive into SEC play. All right, on to the next. We have got Vanderbilt, and it's a sad day. I thought Vandy were going to start 3-0. They're now 2-1 after losing to Georgia State, 32-36. This was at Georgia State. I was pulling for Vanderbilt, and they let me down. But I suppose that, and at least now I get to see what the fan base has had for the past, God knows how long, ever since I've been alive, honestly. They struggled, obviously, losing to Georgia State. I say they struggled. They played an okay football game, but you cannot be giving up 36 points to Georgia State. Offense for Vanderbilt, decent enough. 18 for 33 for Pavia, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns. Decent enough numbers to win a football game. They spread the ball around well. They ran it for 110 also. But if you look at the other side of that coin, the other quarterback threw for as many yards as Pavia, threw for 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, so same amount of touchdowns to interception ratio, and they ran the ball all over Vanderbilt. 34 rushes, 157 yards, and 1 touchdown. That's really where you're going to get killed if you're Vanderbilt. They've never been the team that is going to be overly physical with everybody. And yes, they're in the SEC, but it's one of the teams that has to be a little more finesse in the way that they play. But you cannot get run on for 160 yards against Georgia State and then thrown on for 270. So work to be had there. I don't know if they had the problem of looking into next week, but they overlooked a Georgia State team that ended up going and getting a win against an SEC team. So congratulations to them. Granted, it is Vanderbilt, but they were 2-0 and looking good. So that Vanderbilt hype is kind of dead. Auburn, New Mexico State. Now, if you look at the scoreline, there's not a huge storyline to be had there. Auburn won 45-19. Granted, New Mexico's 0-3 this year so far, so not a good look for New Mexico State. But for Auburn, it's maybe a bit of a turning the page. We all know that Peyton Thorne has not had a good start to his football season. Hank Brown ended up starting this game for Auburn at quarterback. 17 for 25, 235 yards, and 4 touchdowns. A much improved quarterback stat line than what Peyton Thorne has had. No turnovers is a huge one for Auburn because they can move the ball okay whenever they're working well. Jarquez Hunter also had a good game, 20 carries, 152 yards, and 1 touchdown. So they were able to move the ball on the ground and through the air. They ran it for a lot. They ran it for 268 on 40 carries. So they were able to move the ball really well on the ground and supplement it with some passing yards too. But passing yards that were not going to put them in danger. Again, no turnovers for Auburn is going to be huge. Fair play to the quarterback from New Mexico. Went 22 of 44. He threw for 291, which for Auburn, you do have to look at that as a bit of a problem. That secondary got torched. They did get 2 interceptions at the end, or 2 interceptions at the end of the day. New Mexico also had 26 carries, 157 yards, and 1 touchdown on the ground. So they were able to move the ball okay, but when you can't punch it in the end zone and finish drives, that's when it becomes a real problem. The thing is, Auburn look like they can score a lot of points, which now they can without giving up the ball so many times. But their defense has got to put in some work. Watching that football game, I kind of watched the first half, and then I was at my parents' and then drove home, kind of missed the second half of that football game. Plus, Kentucky-Georgia was on, so I was watching that instead. It looked like Auburn got the ball moved on them very, very easily, which they're going to need to clean that up whenever it gets to SEC week, or just SEC play in general. Again, you can give up a bunch of yards to New Mexico and not get beat. And again, if you put up 45 points of your own, it may be a moot point. But whenever the offense cannot move the ball as easily, if you're getting run through like a sieve and getting the ball thrown over the top of you all day long, it could be a problem. I mean, again, their quarterback got outplayed by the guy from New Mexico, so that's never a great thing. But again, good win for Auburn. Could be a bit of a turn in the page in the quarterback room for them. So congrats to them. All right. Here's one of the games that I actually ended up, one of the few that I ended up winning money on this past weekend. Toledo went to Mississippi State and beat them 41-17. Not a great thing if you're a Mississippi State fan. I've been saying that Mississippi State has a football team that can do well. They won't win anything. They're not going to win the SEC. They can be an okay bowl contender, but they're not going to win anything. But man, this past weekend was a bad week for them. I'll just read you some stats from the Toledo team, which Toledo, fair play to them. They have a good football team. Tucker Gleason went 23 of 28, only had 5 incompletions, 285 yards and 3 touchdowns. He threw the ball all over the place on them, which we know Mississippi State is not exactly known for their defense and their secondary, but I mean, an absolutely abysmal day at the offense for Mississippi State's secondary. It didn't get much better on the ground. 45 carries, 169 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Toledo. Blake Shapen, the quarterback from Mississippi State, had an okay stat line: 23 of 30 or 28 of 39, 319 and 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Had a QBR of a 19.7. That is not good. Probably the bit more of alarming stat for them: 27 rushes for 66 yards, less than 3 yards per carry from Mississippi State. So that's going to be something they have to fix up. Yeah, Mississippi State is always a team that has been able to take the lid off of it and really play an air raid offense. Of course, Mike Leach being the former head coach. It's going to be an air raid style offense, but you have to be able to supplement with some kind of ground game, and they have not been able to do so. Yeah, congrats to Toledo. Mississippi State has got some serious work to be done. All right, now let's actually get to some interesting football games. So the first one I want to talk about was the last one of the night on Saturday. Georgia Bulldogs 13, Kentucky Wildcats 12. Now, there's a lot of panic in the Georgia camp, which I don't think there should be. It's still Georgia football. They're still a good football team. But there was a real chance they lost that game Saturday night. Kentucky Wildcats, in my mind, Kentucky always plays Georgia hard. They always play everybody pretty hard, especially when it comes to big SEC teams. They're 1-2 this year. They looked horrible against South Carolina, but they went out and really grounded out against a good Georgia team. I don't think Georgia played their best ball, obviously. Kentucky were able to get some real good stops and were able to move the ball at times. If Georgia play a better offense in this football game, they lose this football game, full stop. If they play any team that can sustain some drives and can sustain some offense, or maybe takes 1 or 2 more chances in this football game, they lose this football game. They're 3-1, or 2-1 rather. Carson Beck did not have his best night. 15 to 24, 160 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Not great when you can't score through the air. Yes, it's Kentucky. I always think of Kentucky having a stout defense, but that's not a good stat line. On the other side, Brock Vandergraff, 14 to 27, 114 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Again, not a great stat line for them either. The only touchdown in this game came from Bran Robinson, who actually only had 2 carries and 5 yards, but a touchdown that ended up actually winning them the football game. Georgia was able to run the ball with some mediocrity, 30 carries for 102 yards, only 3.4 yards per carry, which again, you can supplement some poor quarterback play with some okay running offense, but they really struggled. Now, I want to say this in the same breath as whenever Bama played USF, it looked like a abysmal performance, because it was. Same can be said for Georgia. Both teams, I'd say, gave a 5.5 performance in both of those football games. But when you're a team and you can give a 5.5 out of 10 performance and still win the football game, there's something to be said for that. But at the same time, whenever you're Georgia and you look at Kentucky on the schedule, or you're Bama and you look at USF on the schedule, you're never going to give them your full playbook. That's just one thing that you're going to keep it simple. You're going to make it easy for your team. And if you go out and execute well, you win this game 35-10. No problem. If you execute poorly, you squeak it out 13-12 because you have good talent on the defensive side of the ball. Georgia's offense is not an offense where it's going to go and blow teams out after having mediocre performances. Yeah, they blew out Clemson after starting play pretty slow. They can score a lot of points when they are clicking, but unlike Alabama, when the tidal wave just kind of rolls you over, I think Georgia have to grow into the game a little bit, and they did not for this football game. And fair play to Kentucky. They kept them from growing into this game, and I think at the end of the day, Georgia won it because they have superior talent. Obviously, Kirby Smart as well being a good head coach, but This was not Georgia's best performance. They go into a bye week now. They're a little banged up on both sides of the football, and they play Bama in 2 weeks. And same can be said for Bama. We're banged up a little bit as well. We play Georgia in 2 weeks. It's going to be a big test early in the season, and obviously I'll talk about that more on Friday night, but I think it comes into the thing of where Georgia thought they could go out here and use 50% of their playbook or whatever they ended up using, because obviously they don't want to show Bama a lot, because then we can game plan for it. We have a week to do so. We can game plan, but I think they wanted to go out there, win this game with the smallest amount of their playbook possible, and it nearly bit them. I've never seen a Georgia football team. I say that. There are performances every year with Georgia where it's one game, and it looks like they go out and they sleepwalk through the football game, and you say, you know what? If the other team had a better offense, they would have won that football game. There have been times where Georgia has squeaked by in games and then gone on to win national championships. It happens. This team is not the finished product. I always say one great thing that makes championship football teams, Kirby Smart does it really well, Nick Saban did it really well, is you peak at the right time. Peaking in week 3 is not the ideal moment. You want to peak at the end of the season. You want to have all your nuts and bolts well greased up and running smoothly at the end of the season, but you still got to perform on week 3. And they didn't perform, and they got away with a win, which is the important part. They got away with an SEC win as well. And the SEC no longer having divisions this year, squeaking away with that win, it was a huge moment in their season. And I think it could pay off in the end for them. Because, again, if they go out and lose to Bama, they have 2 SEC losses on their schedule. It's a totally different season for them. Again, they got the win. Kentucky played a good football game, defensively especially. If they had an offense, they'd probably go out and win that game. But Georgia squeaked by 13-12, and that's about all I got to say on that. Something interesting did happen. I actually didn't know this was happening. We had basketball started unbeknownst to me. I didn't know that going into this week. What? What? Oh. Okay, well, I was wrong. This was not a basketball game. Apparently, Tennessee beat Kent State 71-0 in a football game, not a basketball game. So, my apologies. This is a football game, not a basketball game. All jokes aside, Tennessee was up 37-0 on Kent State. And again, yes, it's Kent State, whatever. Beating a team 71-0 is a impressive feat. I hate that they go kick onside kicks and all this kind of thing. I don't like Josh Heupel as a coach overall, but I mean, they went out and they put on an absolute demolition job against Kent. It was 37-0 in the first quarter. They outscored them 28-0 in the second quarter, and then went on and put up 6 points in the second half. That is a splattering if I've ever seen it. You don't have to really look at numbers in this game. Passing numbers for Tennessee, they were spread around a little bit, but I mean, holy cow. The number I do want to take a look at for Tennessee in this football game is the running game. 55 carries, 456 yards. That averages out to 8.3 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns on the ground. Usually when you see a stat line like 71-0, you expect them to go out and throw the ball all over the place and just dump balls over the top to receivers. But they put less than 300 yards through the air, 284 with 3 touchdowns. But 456 yards on the ground with 6 touchdowns is a seriously impressive stat for Tennessee. And I hate giving Tennessee credit. I hate doing it, but they played a good football game. They went out and absolutely dominated it. So fair play to them. They will get into some more serious competition in the upcoming weeks, obviously, but they look like a serious contender. They are a team that's not to be messed with. I think if they played Georgia Saturday, they win that game outright. So there's a lot to be said about Tennessee's offense. And the one thing that's always been missing for Tennessee was a defense. Usually you'd see something like this stat line and they'd give up 17 points to Kent or whatever it is. But they're not giving up a lot of points, and they're scoring a boatload of points. So they're a real problem going forward. Now, a game that did not have a lot of implications nationally or did not have a lot of implications in the playoff or whatever it is, the Texas Longhorns beat UTSA 7-56. Now, the storyline, if you watch this game, if you're a box score kind of reader, it doesn't really tell you a lot. But Quentin Ewers goes down in this game with a apparent rib injury. He seems to be fine. He'll be up playing probably not next week, but maybe the week after. Arch Manning comes into this football game and absolutely takes over. He sets the state of Texas on fire with his performance, as it should have. 9 for 12, 223, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions, a 99.9 QBR rating. Not only did he do it through the air, he did it on the ground. 30 carries, 53 yards, and 1 touchdown on the ground. When you see the name Manning, I don't think of speed. I think of great quarterback play and can do work in a pocket. He can do it on the ground. He can do it through the air. He's going to be a serious problem coming up. And again, not just for other competition, but maybe for Quentin Ewers. I don't think he's going to get the starting job over Ewers. It's UTSA. There's a lot to be said for this team going forward. I think Ewers is their guy. But when it comes up to next season, or if Ewers has a down week or something like that, he is the real deal. 100% the real deal. I hated the hype coming around him early on whenever he chose to go to Texas, all this kind of stuff. But he is going to be a serious problem for teams going forward. All right. I think we've covered just about every other team. Oh, I did want to cover this just because I have to do it. Memphis went to Florida State and beat Florida State 20-12. We're not going to dig too deep into this football game. Florida State is in absolute shambles. I think we would go ahead and just play Florida State every week for the year to come and just see who can actually win a football game. But Florida State is in a real bad way. I'll just give you some quick numbers. Seth Hennigan for Memphis, the quarterback, went 25 for 38, 272, and 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. You got thrown on for 272 against Memphis. That's a serious problem if you're Florida State. Obviously, they're not going to make the playoff. They might not win, I don't even know, a handful of games this year. They have a okay schedule and an awful football team. It's going to be a real problem. And I think this does dig into one thing that I've said before, maybe not on here, but I think that whenever you get a team like this, they've benefited a lot from the transfer portal. Like last year, they brought in a lot of transfer guys, look real good, but now they're seeing the exact antithesis of that. They are getting bit by the transfer portal. After week 1 against Georgia Tech, they go out and lose. Okay, that sucks. You lose week 1, it happens. Week 2, you lose against Georgia Tech. You lose against Boston College. You say, okay, maybe this team is not exactly what I expected it to be when I arrived, and now I'm just trying to get through this year. You go in there, most people choose colleges, well, used to choose colleges, because they wanted to play for a team, because they saw something in a football team that they wanted to be a part of. I don't think that happens as often as it used to anymore with the amount of money that's in the transfer portal and in NIL and all this kind of stuff. That does not happen as often as it used to. Guys caring about playing for a football team. And I think Florida State are seeing the farthest, most extreme end of that in the way that nobody looks like they want to be there at Florida State. DJ Uiagalelei is not a quarterback to carry a program. Might be the nicest guy in the world. He's not the guy to carry a program. Nobody out there can catch a football. I mean, they seriously drop a boatload of passes. So he doesn't get any help from his receivers. Nobody looks like they want to be there. It is a dumpster fire in Florida State. And I don't want to say a ton about it because, it's not the SEC or anything like that. I just wanted to put it out there. I can jump on my soapbox about the transfer portal and NIL all day long. But we're going to move on. We're going to talk about Bama, Wisconsin. Now, Alabama goes up north. We play Wisconsin and beat them 42-10. Perfect. Last week we had a good-looking scoreboard. We do this week as well. But this one was a much, much, much improved performance. We played Georgia in 2 weeks. If we went out and put in another performance like we did against USF last weekend, I would say we're in trouble. Now, we might be the favorite. I'm not here to talk about that, though. I want to talk about this performance a little bit. You could see it right off the get-go. Actually, before I say anything, I want to say Tyler Van Dyke, great quarterback. He got hurt in the opening drive of this football game. So we're praying that hopefully he will be back. It's not something serious. I don't really know what it is. I haven't looked a ton into it, but hopefully he gets healthy for the rest of the season and goes on to have a great season. Now, on to the football game. Bama, I'll just go ahead and say it outright. The offensive line looks like a different unit than it did last weekend. You could have told me that we went from not just a week away, we went from a whole year. A few changes on that offensive line made the biggest difference it possibly could. Now, the offshoot to that is it shows that we may be a little bit thin in offensive line play, so we have to stay healthy going forward. But the unit this past weekend did a phenomenal job. I don't think Wisconsin is as big and physical as USF is. I think they're faster, and I think they're more skilled, but that offensive line just looked worlds apart from what they did a week ago, and the performance followed suit. Jalen Milroe, I mean, if not Jackson Dart, he looks like the Heisman favorite for me going forward. 12 of 17, 196 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns, and he also did it on the ground. 14 carries, 75 yards, and 2 touchdowns, averaging about 5.5 yards per carry. Jam Miller got the majority of the carries as well, looked really good behind a new offensive line. 9 carries, 71 yards, almost averaging about 8 yards a carry, and 1 touchdown to his name also. This team looks like a much improved unit. It really is a rising tide, raises all ships kind of thing. If the offensive line play is bad and there's 1 or 2 bad pieces in it, it can really sink a football team. But if it performs well and it's vibing together, the unit is cohesive, it can really help you play. And that was kind of the story of the game overall. Bama looked like the most dominant, or they just looked like they were never going to lose that football game. Ryan Williams had another career day, 4 receptions. Lost it here. He got 4 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown. He still is right on track. If he's not, then he should be the most valuable freshman in college football. He will be a serious problem for the next 3 years because he will be going to the league in 3 years. But, man, he is a real problem. I think that Milroe's play looked a lot better this week as well. A little bit more decisive. Had a lot more time to make decisions. I feel like whenever you're a quarterback and you feel like you just can't get that time in the pocket, you're never comfortable, so you can't go through your progression very well. He did a good job of that this past weekend. Made good decisions, no interceptions, nothing like that. I think this team as a unit, if we keep on doing what we did last week, we can beat anybody, genuinely beat anybody. That we have a lot of tough teams on the schedule. We have, obviously, if we end up going to the SEC championship, we have that to play for. We play Georgia in 2 weeks. That's going to be a huge stepping stone in this season. And if we lose or win, it's not the be-all, end-all. Again, it's a 12-team playoff. There's a lot of chances there. Having 12 teams now, it doesn't feel like you have to kind of ride that razor's edge of SEC teams just knocking each other out in the regular season. But if we keep trending the way that we're trending, I think we can compete with anybody. Defense looked really good. Secondary had a few moments here and there where we didn't look as assured. Keon Saab continues to perform. Jahad Campbell keeps on looking good. We had some real LT Overton had a career day. Let me pull up his stats real quick. He was phenomenal in this game. Delivered probably the best hit of the season. We'll go through some defensive stats real quick. Where's Overton? Yeah, 6 tackles, 2 solos, 1 tackle for loss, being the sack. Jahad Campbell continues to perform, 8 tackles, 4 solos. This team on the defensive front looks very good. On the backside, we still look good. Granted, we're not playing the starting quarterback for Wisconsin. Van Dyke there were moments where we could have gotten off the field on 3rd down, but he definitely kept them in it. After they lost him, this game was over, I think. I don't think, all respect to Braden Locke, I don't think he was ever going to beat Bama. But, yeah, I mean, this team looked worlds improved over last week. Wisconsin still had an okay game on the ground, 149 yards rushing, only averaged about 3 yards per carry, though. Bama on hold, sacks included, ran for about 5 on average. Ty Simpson got a couple throws in there as well. Looked good. Yeah, this team is a serious, serious problem when the offensive line is clicking and healthy, but we got to maintain that. We don't have a very deep team. I don't think that we can afford any injuries on the defensive or on the offensive front. We had a couple. Rasal got hurt. Malachi Moore, I think, had a concussion, which he just has to go through protocol. And I think Richard Young also had a leg injury in this game. I hate playing on turf fields. I'm just going to say that right now. I hate turf. I don't think we have as many problems as we did. I think Rasal was the only one that I think it was Rasal that had the only one that may have been caused due to turf, like cleats sticking in it and stuff like that. But I didn't actually get a chance to see the replay of Young's injury either. So I hate playing on turf. That's just a different discussion for a different day. But yeah, this team looks good. We got a week to get healthy and get ready for Georgia. Again, I don't think we showed everything we had. It's still going to be a little bit of a feast or famine offense. We sustained drives, but we also had one drive that was 2 plays in 17 seconds for 76 yards and a touchdown, which really kind of set the tone for this game. So it's still a little bit feast or famine, which is okay when it works, but against a team like Georgia, elite secondary, elite enough defense. I don't think they're as good as they have been in previous years, but you got to be able to sustain drives. And we did that better. There's still plenty of room for improvement. Penalties were better. I do want to talk about reffing. Not in this game necessarily, but throughout college football in general. There were some calls in that Georgia game. Awful. Georgia got a roughing the passer call. That was terrible. I want to say the Texas A&M Florida game, there was a targeting when somebody got hit in like the butt, like the left hip. Call for targeting, ridiculous call. Even like in the NFL, it just kind of goes through everything. That Jalen Hurts run a couple nights ago, gets up after a 4th down run, spikes the ball, gets called for a delay of game. Like, we don't need refs microscoping everything that happens. Refs are there for the safety of the player. And I'm not going to get on a whole thing about refs. I can do it for hours and hours and hours. But refs are there to protect players, not change the course of a football game. If you are protecting a player and you change the course of the game due to protecting someone, that's okay. But whenever Nussmeier gets hit in the South Carolina LSU game, he gets blocked and he goes down and it looks bad. You shouldn't throw a flag on that. He is a defender, for lack of a better term, during that play. After the ball is intercepted and going back the other way, that should have been a pick six, and South Carolina go out and lose by 3 points after a pick six is taken away. It's not even protecting a player. Nussmeier goes down. He's just a person getting blocked at that point. Nothing malevolent in that play. The same thing with the Texas A&M Florida. The targeting call, that dude hits him in the hip with the top of his helmet. That's not a dirty thing. It shouldn't be illegal. Targeting is a rule that has just gotten out of hand. It's a snowball at this point. It's rolling down a hill. Nobody can stop it, but nobody knows what to do about it. There was a hit in what game was it? It was, it's going to come to me later. Maybe it was the Indiana game. And it was UCLA. Quarterback gets sacked with the ball still in his hands. Gets called for roughing the passer. He's not a passer. He's a guy holding a football. If he never throws the football, it's not roughing the passer. It can't be. Like stuff like that. It just blows my mind how much referees intervene in football games when they just don't need to. So yeah, that's my rant on that. You can let me know what you guys think about that. But anyway, back to Bama. We look good. We got Georgia in 2 weeks. We're going to do a preview on Friday for the other games in the SEC since we have a bye week. So I appreciate you guys jumping in. I appreciate you guys listening to my rants and rambling. I hope you guys enjoy. I will see you guys in the next one.